I joined a very serious game jam, where I had 8 days to make a game based on the theme, Spin to Win. And upon hearing that for the first time, I knew exactly what I wanted to make. Hearing those words made me think of a toy from my childhood that filled me with such nostalgia that I couldn't even entertain another idea. And if you've read the title of the video, you know that idea was Beyblades, baby! I made a Smash Bros. Inspired Beyblade game in 8 days, and trust me, it gets pretty crazy. We got multiplayer here by myself in just 1 week. And stay tuned to see how I did it. Day 1 started off pretty ordinary. I sat there waiting to see the start of the jam before work, and then I got the theme Spin to Win, which, as previously discussed, I pretty much immediately decided upon a Beyblade game with Smash Bros. Mechanics, including an arcade mode for single player and a versus multiplayer mode. So we will have to really work to get that into place. For the start of work, I set up a basic main menu. This was just to get the game a little bit playable, not that big of a deal. And then we had to start working on the Beyblades themselves, because, what else was I going to do? Start off, I added just a basic momentum system, just to get blades moving and picking up speed. That's going to be a central mechanic of the game where you build up speed in order to ram into your opponents and knock them out of the arena. Got the start of blade momentum, and then afterwards got blades to bounce off of objects when they hit them, because that's also going to be very important to this game about knocking Beyblades out of the arena. And I also want to have some collision objects, little boxes that you can run into, just to spice up level design for different, stages. Then, once we got blades knocking into other objects, it's time to get blades knocking into each other, which was a bit more complicated and involved a lot of physics that I, was not my strong suit in school, so we gotta get that figured out. But basically, when two blades collide, it'll average out the momentum of both of them based on their weight and current speed, and then they'll knock each other in opposite directions. This does get tweaked a bit later, but the system is working now as for day 1. And then after that, since we've got the blades able to build up speed, knock into each other, we gotta get the game controllable. And since I don't have friends to play test with, I also gotta get CPU AI. So I worked on that for a bit, and it was actually pretty simple. So, I got that all set up, and I, was laying the groundwork for the player inputs to be expandable to multiple players, because I know I'm going to be needing that later. So that was, very basic, and it now is technically playable. And then to end off day 1, I added a KO system, and then also some nice visual touch-ups, like the blades spinning faster as they build up speed. That's going to be very important for visualizing how fast you're going. Adding names so you can tell, oh, all right, this blade is player 1 and this blade is a CPU. And then finally, just some shadows and colored lighting just to get the vibe a bit better. And that was the end of day 1. A pretty strong start. We've got some very good base mechanics in, and I'm hopeful to see what we get done later in the week. If we're already this far in, I can't see time being an issue at all. That's totally not foreshadowing. With the base mechanics added in day 1, day 2 was mainly focused on adding the auxiliary mechanics to try and spice up the gameplay a bit. So the first of these was to add a boost pad, which will, it'll set your direction to whatever angle that the boost pad is pointed in, and then it'll give you a bump up in speed based on your max speed and acceleration. So this is great, again, for level design, similar to the boxes earlier, where, now we could spice up, different sections of the level by giving you a boost, and then we can control the direction to try and, influence the flow of, I want to say combat, but I don't know if combat's quite the right word. But it helps, funnel players into certain positions and gives them, prioritization of, do you go right for the enemy or get a boost pad? Then, to build up off of this, I added a minigame to let it rip. Because what is the point of a Beyblade game if you can't let it rip? That is literally what the whole toy is. That is the only skill expression in the toy. So I added that. You just really spam the movement keys while in this little 3-second timer at the start of the game. You gotta get the 3, 2, 1, let it rip. Yeah, so we got that in, and it's kind of hype. I'm not gonna lie. It's not like super useful near like the mid game, but at the start of the game, you can probably get like a full kill if you're good enough at it. And then randomly, I just decided to add multiplayer on a whim. It took me literally like 5 minutes because of how I set up the controls earlier, and it totally worked perfectly with no issues. That's not foreshadowing either. Moving on though, the final thing I did for day 2 was add sound effects to the game for blades colliding, blades landing on the ground, hitting a boost pad, and letting your Beyblade rip, which just add a bit more juice to the gameplay. And I decided to add these early on so that I can just attach them to actions that I just put into place, just to, get the game feeling a bit better, since it looks very basic right now and there's not a whole lot of feedback. But that will be the focus of day 3. Day 3 mostly built off of the foundation of day 2, with, ending off on sound effects to add more, like, juice to the gameplay. Day 3 was entirely focused on adding more juice. So, the camera now will dynamically pan throughout the stage based on where the players are, which just adds a bit more movement and life to the game, rather than just the static camera that could get kind of hard to see when you got further away from it. The coolest thing I think I added were the sparks when two Beyblades collide. And these sparks only appear when they're moving at a certain speed. I do update the effect later, but I think it looks kind of sick, especially like in the later versions of the game. This is awesome and I think adds a lot, especially with the like metal clanking. And then I also added a little like flash animation for the boost pads, just again to add a bit more feedback to using certain level objects. That was pretty much all I added in day 3. It wasn't like the craziest thing, but it does help the gameplay to feel a lot smoother, and we're making great progress. We've got, 5 more days, and we already have a nice functional gameplay loop with a lot of juice behind it, and some like nice feeling mechanics. What could possibly go wrong? Day 4, I didn't get anything done. That's not a joke. I legitimately did not record a single thing for day 4. So on to day 5. Day 5 was pretty much a continuation of day 4 because I was working on modeling and art. So the most namely thing is that I added this PS1 shader because I didn't want to draw textures. So adding a lot of dithering and post-processing effects really just covers up any mistakes I made. And then on top of that, I also added some basic models for, the boxes, the walls of the arena, the Beyblades themselves, which is split up into 3 distinct parts. You've got the, Beyblade body, you've got the little, jagged blades that extrude out of it, and then a little, topper piece. And then I can switch out the materials on these to change the color scheme of the Beyblades up, which will add some nice variety. And then I also redid the menu theming. It does get a bit better later. Overall, game's looking a lot nicer, a lot more polished and complete. It is a little concerning though that I spent 2 whole days on just visuals and no gameplay changes, but we already got most of the gameplay out in the first place, so surely this won't be a problem, right? Day 6, I worked on UI changes to get the game a lot more functional. First up, I just added some music, which just, makes the game a lot more lively, especially with the other sound effects, it gives a bit more impact. I also made sure that the beat drop synced up with the Let It Rip minigame so that, once you end the Let It Rip, then the beat drop of the song will start, just to, kind of coincide those 2 aspects of the game. And then I added a versus lobby, where players can join in by just hitting the move stick on whatever controller or keyboard thing they're using. So this is just a really functional and simple way to get players to know what player they are and join in, which was necessary for the multiplayer mode. And then finally, I just added some end screens so that you can actually progress in the game. So in arcade, you'll be able to proceed to the next level. And then in versus mode, you'll be able to play again or change out who's playing, which were very functional changes. I also discovered that the multiplayer wasn't working. Yeah, no, remember when I said it was easy? Yeah, no, I don't know what I was on. The way I implemented it meant that only one player could move at a time. But since I was testing it by myself, I was only ever moving one player at a time. So I didn't realize, and I had to fix that. And I kind of had to do it manually rather than using Godot's input system, which, was a bit tough. But for a jam, it works. I'm not making this a full game, so it should be fine. But as long as I am just locked in on day 7 and 8, we should have no problems whatsoever. All I have to do is add levels. Day 7, I did nothing. I don't mean like a day 4 kind of situation where like I was just working and didn't finish anything. I didn't open the game on day 7 at all. I did nothing. On day 8, I started off by just adding the menu changes like the credits, and then a button to toggle the filter on and off, because I know not everyone's going to want that. And then I added a versus map, which is pretty simple, but it means that the multiplayer mode is finished. So now, all I have to do is make some arcade levels and submit the game. And I had something later that day, which means I had to lock in and just grind within a time limit. So that's exactly what I did. In just 1 hour, I added 10 levels to the arcade mode, including a final boss fight. I worked in a tutorial. I did everything I could. I locked in on that hour, and I got it done. And then I uploaded the game, and then I left for the day. And that was it. I did it. We didn't have a game until day 8, but my god did I bring it together, and isn't that just beautiful. Overall, I think the game's pretty good. The balancing is genuinely atrocious, but I think it's kind of fine because it's a party game, especially within, the time limit it was made in. But I probably should have spent more than an hour making the levels. That was definitely a choice. Really should have worked on day 7. Don't know why I didn't. But yeah, game is playable for free. Link in the description below. If you want to play that, hit it up. You can also play my other game, Cryptid Hunter, which is my ongoing project. I also have some videos if you want to check those out. But other than that, subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this, and like the video if you enjoyed it. Yeah, I mean, that's it for me. See ya.